We are back with another episode of Dynasty Theory. Today we're going to talk about some veteran gambles with big payoffs. Dan, what's going on, buddy?
JB, Mitch, good to see you guys. Mitch, man, I'm looking at the show notes and I peeked at them like a couple times in the last couple of days, and they just keep getting bigger and longer. Like, I'm telling you, man, in the Bauer household, he's got to be in the doghouse for being in like the show sheets instead of the real sheets. I don't know.
You're so right, because like as soon as what will happen for everyone who's watching real quick, John will make show notes. I make a copy and edit on my own. So like I'll add in a couple players. I'm off and on my own. And then I will load up John's version like 2 days later. And it's like a 4-page, like, I don't even know what to call this. I didn't know we're talking about 45 players today, but I'm excited that we're talking about 45 players today.
Right. John's that teacher that, like, you think you did your homework, like you said, Mitch. You open the show notes a couple of days ago, you put your notes in there, you think you're done, and then the teacher just keeps piling on work.
JB, I'm sorry for being diligent and wanting to provide as much value and insight as humanly possible. You know what? So sue me, Dan. All right?
Hey, we are letting the listeners know that JB has gone the extra mile this week, man. We're just concerned about Mrs. Bauer. That's why Mitch and I are having this intervention in the beginning.
Well, there's no reason to have an intervention because, she's approaching her 41st week of being pregnant. And
here you are on Dynasty Theory.
and she is quite exhausted. So by like 7 o'clock, she's ready for bed. So it allows me to maybe get in the sheets while I'm already in the sheets.
So she's the real hero of this show, is what you're saying.
She is the lifeblood of Dynasty Theory. All right. We don't want to waste any more time. We have a lot of guys we want to talk about. Surprise, surprise. We're talking about, and Mitch and I, we couldn't even finish a conversation. We even started early on an episode of the Pivot Point earlier this morning. We were talking about higher end assets, studs versus more of a depth approach. Honestly, Mitch, we could carry you over to next weekend and continue that conversation, but it kind of flows into this conversation very nicely, talking about the veterans that maybe we're looking to acquire that really could pay off for our dynasty teams. Because right now, as we sit here in June, this is a very nice time to go out and try to acquire those veterans at a really nice price. I know I'm trying to send a lot of offers out that involve draft picks, that involve young, promising players that maybe somebody that's looking to transition to a rebuild would be interested in. But I want to talk about some higher end running backs, higher end wide receivers very quickly that maybe could. Oh, Mitch,
hold on. So I brought up the example, like the show topic, right? Mm-hmm. But I wanted to give the reason for it because it's important, because we always talk about buying veterans. And I think a lot of people could listen to it, be like, why do I want to buy a veteran in Dynasty? I want Tank Dell in Dynasty, right? Because Tank Dell was amazing, and he was. So I'm not picking on Tank Dell here. But if you look at the top 10 wide receivers last year, you have Mike Evans, who was wide receiver 7. You had Keenan Allen, who was wide receiver 8. You had Devontae Adams, who was wide receiver 10. Like, if you were willing to go in on these guys at their dynasty value last offseason, you were going to be winning leagues because you had these kind of older vets on your roster, more so than if you went with, let's say, Jordan Addison, because Jordan Addison was valued higher than all of them this past offseason, right? Jordan Addison, great. Wide receiver 23, but he scored 60 points less than these guys did over the course of the season. And is Jordan Addison even more valued now than those guys? Maybe a little bit, but I'd rather have those guys over Jordan Addison, right? So I just think it's really important. We've been in rookie hype mode forever, and we're going to be talking up these rookies throughout the season. But now it's time to actually get back to, hey, these veterans could, if you are right on them, they could help you win the league. If you're wrong, that's another story we'll get into as well, right?
Well, that's why you have to be selective. You have to do your homework. You have to listen to Dynasty Theory, and hopefully that pays off when you look at your bank account at the end of the season. But it comes down to that conversation that's come up so many times. Would you rather get wide receiver 30 production over 5 years or difference making production for 2 years. That's what it comes down to. And I think, we talked about approaches changing over the last couple of years, Mitch, on this week's episode of the Pivot Point. That's certainly come into play for me, and I can certainly say last year was a very nice season for me. So anyway, the high end running backs, wide receivers, I want to throw a few at you guys that are at least 27 years old today that maybe could potentially, depending on how they produce or don't produce in 2024, see a change in their value moving forward. So it's like get out at market or hang on because they are going to be difference makers. Dan, I want to start with you. Christian McCaffrey.
Fun one to start out with, JB. 28 years old, man. But I asked the question, what's the price of a league winner? And CMC is that. So my stance on him is hold on until you can't refuse. Doesn't mean I'm not willing to shop him, trade him, but it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, if I'm not contending, I'm not giving you that. I'm looking to be a rebuilding team discount, especially this time of the year, because those people are going to come and they're going to be knocking at your door that want to compete, and hopefully you can get some type of an arms race, if you will, and have people bidding against each other. So Mitch, get out at market or hold on.
The problem is we have some trades coming up that talk about a couple future picks and a player, right? Christian McCaffrey is a guy that makes people contenders. So if they're willing to move their first round picks, you're going to have to assume those are late picks going into the next 2 future years. So I just want to say, if you are doing that, just know you're helping that other team become that much better than every other team in the league, because that's the difference Christian McCaffrey makes. So for me, I don't want just picks. I want like other teams' picks if this team is going to be trading, right? Because I'm making that team that much better, which is going to make the picks that I'm trading for that much worse.
All right, so a few trades here. And for reference, Fantasy Calc running back 2, KTC running back 4. I have him at running back 4. Dan, I saw you slip in there, running back 2. Looking at Mike Clay's projection, Mike Clay from ESPN, 24.1 points per game in 2024. That is a difference-making point per game perspective here. But here's a couple trades. Mitch, I want to start with you. CMC for Ramondre Stevenson, a 25 first and a 26 first. 12-team Superflex, start 10, 1 additional tight end premium of 1 point.
Yeah, so this was the trade I was bringing up. I mean, if you look at value, 2.5 first, Christian McCaffrey is probably fair, but I think those picks are going to be late, and I don't want like Ramondre plus whatever late pick is next year, so I'm Christian McCaffrey.
Dan?
Yeah, I want to agree there too. And all these guys we're about to go through, this is where the coach in me comes out. I'll start with a McCaffrey of, man, I like watching the film. I like watching the games. I watched him last year. He looks spry, man. He looks great. We all know about him. He's a workout warrior. He has no issues off the field. Just got a contract extension for 2 years. His job's secure. The situation's great. So I just want to summarize with these guys. I think we're looking at those things too. I think there's different kinds of 28-year-old football players, and he's a different kind of 28-year-old football player. So I'm with Mitch here. If I knew they were early first and someone else's first, I do like Ramondre a little bit. So if I thought they were early first, that's a lot of pieces. I might go that direction, but more likely they're not. They're late first. I think New England stinks. So I want CMC instead of just getting those, I don't know, pieces.
All right, well, Dan, 12-team start 11. Drake London or Aaron Jones. Mitch, do you hear that in the background?
I hear something. Someone's clogging in the background.
It's one of my kids upstairs. or maybe Mars trying to jump up and down so the baby just comes out. But Dan, I want to start with you here. CMC for Drake London and Aaron Jones, 12-team start 11.
This is where it changes for me. As much as I love CMC and he is a league winner, I think Drake London this year is sort of a league winner, and I think you're getting a running back in Aaron Jones in a start 11 league. So there's extra value in having that extra guy. I think Jones has got 2 good years in him too, where it's enough to offset losing CMC, and you're just going to enjoy Drake London for like 10 plus years to come. So I'd rather build my roster around that receiver. I think London is the key piece you need to be able to say that's enough, and you're giving me Aaron Jones so I can still compete now while being set for the future.
Mitch, does this swing to
it's
make you
Christian McCaffrey for me. And the reason is, as much as we like London, we know like some of his peripherals are pretty good. I'm not sure he's an elite wide receiver yet. I'm just not. Hopefully Kirk Cousins can make him be that, but so far he's needed Kirk Cousins in order to be that, right? So for me, I want Christian McCaffrey. If you're saying Garrett Wilson, I'll go Garrett Wilson, right? Because I'm very sure that he is an elite wide receiver. I'm just not sure we're there yet with London.
All right. I want to drop one trade question here very quickly, answer for Ngaini here. So in the new Dino League, 12-team Superflex, 10 starting, 0.75 tight end premium. I'm in that league. Took over an orphan. Someone offered Tank Dell for Kyle Pitts straight up. I'm sticking with Pitts. Dan, are you on mute?
Dan's always on
Pitts.
You can't. It is like we've talked about this.
I'm Italian, JB. Like I need a, I get it. I'm working on that. It's this new mic, sensitive.
Dan needs to learn how to use his equipment. All right, Christian McCaffrey for Bryce Young, DeAndre Swift, and Xavier Worthy. Start 10, 12 team. Mitch?
Christian McCaffrey.
Holy shit.
This is a bunch of like, hey, maybe they could be good at some point or the best running back in the league. I'll just take the best running back in the league.
Yeah, I'd lean CMC there too. I did put in my notes, like, do I need a quarterback? I mean, if I'm desperate for a quarterback, we know the value in Superflex. You get the potential of a Worthy with Kansas City. Not a big Swift guy, but he's in a good opportunity for a year. So if I need a quarterback, I'll go the Bryce side. If I don't need a quarterback, then I'd go the CMC side.
I like B. Ford's comment there, talking about the Italian hand gestures. Okay. So Mitch you got to give Mitch your left leg.
No, just give me a good player. That's the only thing that I'm saying. I understand the Drake London one. I completely get it. But you're talking about Ramondre, Swift, Xavier Worthy, Bryce Young. None of those guys are like, hey, I really want them on my dynasty roster, right?
And again, I mean, you do talk about it's that huge production over replacement. And let's say you get that even just 2 more years out of McCaffrey. Do you ever get the difference making production from a Bryce, a Swift, and a Worthy? I don't know. All right, moving on to Saquon Barkley, 27 years old, Fantasy Calc, running back 7, KTC running back 8. I fall in line with Fantasy Calc at running back 7. Dan, you have him running back 6. Looking at Mike Clay's production here, his projection in 2024, 18.1 points per game. Dan, Barkley for Bryce Young and Daniel Bellinger, 12 team, start 11.75 tight end premium.
I mean, it's start 11, so I'm going to ask the question, do I need a quarterback again, and can I spare a running back? If I'm not desperate for the quarterback, I mean, I would lean the Barkley side here. But there is a scenario where, again, if I'm desperate for Bryce and I got a little running back depth, I could potentially make the move.
To me, I think Saquon Barkley might be one of the most attainable guys based on his current value, what his potential production could be. Like we're I think a lot of people would prefer like Kenneth Walker to Saquon Barkley. People prefer Travis Etienne, and I get it, the age difference, but I think Saquon is in store for a huge season there in Philadelphia. And I know you could look at the usage from the way Philadelphia has historically used their backs. Have they had a Saquon Barkley? Have they really paid to bring a running back in? I mean, we saw what Miles Sanders looked like when you remove him from Philadelphia. Think about what Saquon Barkley is going to look like there as long as he's healthy. So, Mitch, you're not moving Barkley for Bryce Young.
No, but Bryce Young, like, we have all the hope for him this upcoming season with all the talent they put around him, but he was the worst quarterback in the league last year, and that was with a lot of backups starting.
Mitch has no hope for Bryce Young.
No, like, I hope he is this upcoming season, but right now, like John said, I think Barkley is in a great position. I don't think that brotherly shove is going to be a huge play anymore because they lost Kelsey. And so in my view, I think Barkley is going to do fantastic this upcoming year.
Aren't you concerned, though? I'm going to play devil's advocate here because this is kind of where it's getting a little controversial with Barkley or the running back in general and Bryce Young. we know the state of the running back position. Let's say Barkley does have this really good year. Running backs have been fragile historically, and he is pushing 30. You could potentially be getting a super flex quarterback if you believe in Bryce Young for 10 plus years. Like, he is the Carolina's guy. Now, I know last year doesn't bode well for that, but
he's pushing 24 just as much as he's pushing 30. So I think it's just on how you look at it. Glass half full, glass empty sort of thing. John's
glass
struggling
is
right
half
now,
empty
and
for
I'm not
Bryce.
sure why.
What'd you say?
You're struggling right now, and I'm not sure why.
Because you could hear I sent a text. I said, just get him to stop pounding on the floor, please.
We can't really hear it though, JB. Stay focused. We can't hear it.
You're great.
It's tough. It sounds like the ceiling's about to cave in on me. So if I'm sitting here and you just see, you know why. Maybe Johnny can then jump in here.
There we
All
go.
right, Barkley for a 25 second and a 26 first. Start 11, 12 team.
Saquon.
Same reason we gave for Christian McCaffrey earlier.
And I'm not waiting until 2026 either, Mitch.
Yeah.
But if you have, let's say you have Barkley, you're not contending, you're getting a 26 first from, it's tough to project out that far, right? But let's say it's an aging team and you think there is the potential for that first. Dan, you're still shaking your head.
Yeah, I think you got to be patient, JB. You'll get a 25 first later on in the season. At some point, someone's going to need that, and they're going to give their first this year versus waiting to 2026. That's where I tell listeners, be patient.
All right, Mitch, Saquon. Then you're going to hate this one. Saquon and a third in 2025, or Roshan and a 26 first. But this is also start 9.
I'm heavy Saquon here, and I'm like, how did you even have to add a third to get that deal done? I'm like, no.
Right.
But that's why we're talking about these guys at this point in the offseason, because they are attainable. I know a lot of people, I want to get out a year early rather than a year late, and I get that, but it's not like you're talking about assets 2 years out in a 26 first that has no risk to it, and you're just adding pieces on to get there value-wise in a Roshan Johnson. All right, transitioning over to Derrick Henry now, 30 years old, fantasy calc running back 16, KTC running back 18. I have him running back 22, so I'm a little below market. Dan, holy running back 13 with a little weird smiley face emoticon, but win now roster dependent. Looking at 16.5 points per game for Mike Clay here in 2024. Mitch, Derrick Henry and a 25 second, or Jordan Addison and a 25 third. 0.5 PPR.
I agree with Dan's notes. This one is very roster dependent because I do think Derrick Henry is a league winner this year, but I'm not even sure he's in the league next year. For me, I'm okay moving off an Addison for a Henry if I am competing. But if I'm even, if I think I'm 5th or 6th in the projected standings, I'm probably not making that deal. I need to be pretty sure that I'm a top 4 team.
Dan?
Man, I am just so on Derrick Henry. And a year ago, it'd be a different tune there. Things weren't looking great with Tennessee, and we know he's at that age cliff of 30. But I've always said Derrick Henry is not your average human being. Like, he was put on this planet with a different mold of like a Marvel superhero and goes to the dream.
I mean, isn't it like looking at me? It's like
just like John.
I mean, I was going to go there. That was in my comps, JB. That was in my comps. But, you beat me to it. But he is just going to a dream landing spot. I think he ages differently, kind of like an Adrian Peterson aged differently. Like, the guy still wants to play into his 40s. Henry is that guy. So I'm going to take Henry in that second all day there. I'll find a different Jordan Addison some other way.
Yeah, I also would lean the Derrick Henry side there. All right, Dan. Derrick Henry in a 26 second, or Isaiah Pacheco, 12 teams, start 10.
Man, as much as I want to like Pacheco and he's younger, and I think Kansas City's got to, keep leveraging him, I'm going to take Henry again and give me that future second. I'll find my Pacheco again in like 2026 with that second. I want Henry again. I just think he's a league winner this year.
Yeah, I'm not taking Pacheco. I mean, he just runs dumb. So that's the biggest reason for me.
But also,
like, I hate watching him play football. It's terrible.
He gets you nervous,
But also, you get that 26 second, which I know it's 2 years out, but it does give you leverage and the flexibility to make another move and kind of that cascading effect there. So I'm going Henry. So the point of what I'm seeing up to this point, 20 minutes in, Dan, Mitch, and I, we are going veteran hunting after this, apparently.
Of course we are.
And probably only for the guys on our show notes, though. Like after our show notes, it's like the cliff.
It's such a good point, though, because that matters. I mean, you don't have Aaron Jones on this list, right? If you brought up Aaron Jones on a lot of these players, I'd be like, I'm taking the young players over Aaron Jones in most cases.
Yeah. To Sean's note there that JB put on the screen, I would take Pacheco.
Yeah. All right. So the question, if you're listening, would you give a mid-second and an early third for Pacheco in a 10-team start 9? So ideally, you want to consolidate into those studs. I don't know that Pacheco, we're going to call him a stud, but with only 90 starters, that mid-second, like you don't need that additional depth, and that ties in perfectly to what Mitch and I talked about on today's pivot point: depth versus studs. All right. Where were we? Okay. Mitch, Derrick Henry and Raheem Mostert or a 25 first, second, and third.
If you're wrong on this trade and you take Henry, your team is in trouble.
Oh.
Like it just is. Like if you give up your whole 25 draft class and like Henry isn't good and Mostert gets hurt week 3, you're in a lot of trouble. But right now, I will say if you're competing, I'm okay with Henry and Mostert, but I don't want them to be my running back 1 and running back 2 right now, right? I'm expecting those guys to come and be my flex plays because I'm already dominant at that position. If that's not the case, if these guys are going to be my 2 running back starters, then no, I'm keeping my picks every day of the week.
Personally, I don't see a situation where I would move off of the picks for this package. Like, yes, the production very well could be there. And we, it's like, well, we're flipping and flopping depending on the day of the week here, apparently. But like, I would much rather explore other options with those picks. But like, unless I am absolutely stacked at wide receiver, my quarterbacks are in a great spot. Tight end, I feel really comfortable with it. I couldn't do it. I still couldn't do it.
I see a scenario where you could do it. And I think if you have, and I have one roster of mine that I think of particular, like if you're a win now in a team with depth, and I think it's good to, Mitch makes a good point. I mean, you're definitely taking a lot of risk there, losing your draft class for 2 30-plus-year-old running backs. That's against what we normally do in Dynasty Fantasy Football. But if you've got some other young pieces around you and you have a win now roster, holy cow, you could get a ton of points out of Henry and Mostert. And I think it's just important to build the rest of your roster with some younger guys. So if it doesn't quite pan out, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be a bust, but they are aging. You're only going to have them for so long that you could still pick things up by 2026 because your entire roster is not that old. But, Henry's worth a 1 and Mostert's worth a 2 if they could produce like we expect. So I think if you're in it for the money, I would go for it.
I would look for other opportunities. Like ideally, I package something else together. In previous trades, we talked about something with like, adding up a Roshan and a Swift and Aaron Jones. Like ideally, I would be looking to move other pieces to get there as opposed to the flexibility and the pick that gives you leverage there in the 25 first. All right. Tyreek Hill, 30 years old, but just a monster on the field. Fantasy calc wide receiver 9, KTC 12. I'm at 12. Dan's at 11. Almost 20 points per game from Mike Clay. Mitch, is Tyreek Hill in a 26 first enough to move off of Garrett Wilson? 12 team start 10.
Yeah, you get the first with it. You get 2 years of production that are probably better than Garrett Wilson. Yeah, I'll take that.
Agree.
All right. 12 team start 10. Tyreek for Tank Dell in a 25 first.
See, I'll flip. I'll go Tank Dell in the first.
This becomes like one of those Henry Barkley type deals. Like if win now, I'm keeping Tyreek Hill. I'm selling otherwise.
All right. So really, this goes back to a comment we like. I hate referencing it, but from the pivot point, Kev dropped in the chat, like moving off of a stud for a pick and some either production or the promise that we get an uptick in value. And that's kind of what we're seeing with moving a Garrett Wilson for a Tyreek production and the flexibility and insulation with the pick, or other way, moving the Tyreek for Dell and the pick. So it kind of goes both ways. And they both tie in very nicely. And then you look at it, would you move Garrett Wilson for Tank Dell, a 25 first and a 26 first? Like if you would combine those two trades? Yeah,
Yep.
I certainly would. All right, Dan, Tyreek Hill. It's Tyreek for Tank Dell Day, apparently. Tyreek for Tank Dell, Kamara in a 25 second. This is half PPR, but it's only start 9, 12 team.
Only start 9 league makes it a little bit easier for me. I'm going to keep my superstar and Tyreek. You know, the difference in this trade is instead of getting a first with Tank Dell, I'm getting these pieces in Kamara in a 25 second, which I could live without. So give me Tyreek.
Same. Completely agree.
Tyreek or a 25 first and second, start 9, PPR 12 team.
I want more. I'll keep Tyreek because I think you could get more than just a random 25 second added in. I think you can get more than that.
We saw it with the Tank. We saw it with the Tank Dell.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, Breach Boys agree.
So the framework of Tyreek for just the picks or Christian McCaffrey for just the picks, we want that player, if at all possible, added in there. Again, giving ideas here with these studs, giving ideas with these veterans, but also kind of the framework for a more general approach if you're doing something with any of these guys. Now, Mitch, Tyreek or Rashee Rice in a 25 first, 12 team start 10 PPR.
Tyreek Rice. I mean, sure, he might be good. I have no faith that he's going to continue what he did this past season. So all about Tyreek there.
Yeah, I'm on the Tyreek side too. Now, again, if you're a believer in Kansas City and Rice, what's the difference of Rice or Tank Dell? Because, you know, Tank Dell's got a little injury history. I just think he's a good dude and awesome. I mean, he's a little more shinier toy right now, but you think about it, it's really the same deal as Tank Dell in a first versus Rice in a first. I'm out on Rice.
Right.
Because of all the damage and everything that's happened. But
I mean, even Kansas City didn't seem like they were all in on Rice because they immediately brought in Hollywood Brown and they went and drafted Xavier Worthy. I mean, I'm sure the off the field things had that is why Worthy is on the team now, but they still drafted him, right? So that's telling me a little bit that they're not all in on Rashee Rice.
Can I ask for either of you guys? No. Okay.
Sorry.
Moving on now. Would you flip if that is Christian Watson instead of Rashee Rice?
Yeah, dude. I shouldn't have hope in Christian Watson, but I do. I just think when he's on the field, he is so dynamic, but he just needs to be on the field.
I'm just going to buy the health insurance policy on his hamstrings, and I'll roll the dice.
There we go.
And then is it safe to assume if we could get Adams, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, and say a 26 first, would you be willing to do that?
I would.
So you're losing a veteran, you're gaining a veteran, not as much point per game production, but also getting the insulation with the future pick. Dan, you seem hesitant.
I don't know. I hate those 26 first, man. I hate to bump. I think Tyreek's a little more guaranteed production than some of the guys on that list, so I'd be hesitant.
What if we do one of those players at a 25 first, but with Tyreek, you kick back a 26 second?
I'm a little more likely there because I have that future, that first next year to.
Yeah, I'm taking the first added on, whatever side it's added on.
With the star receiver.
All right. DJ Moore, I threw him on. He's only 27 years old, but like the situation is changing so much. Fantasy Calc wide receiver 20. I'm at wide receiver 20 as well. KTC wide receiver 22. Dan wide receiver 15. Mike Clay 2024 projection at 14.9 point per game. Mitch, DJ Moore and 212 for Drake London. Start 9.
Drake London, no hesitation.
Yeah, finally, Mitch.
All right. This is a 12-team start 10 PPR. Dan, I want to start with you. DJ Moore and a 25 third, or Xavier Leggett, a 26 first and a 25 second.
And this may just be my blinders. I'm just at this point in time not on Xavier Legette. Maybe I should be. I don't know. So I'm going to take DJ Moore, man. I want that star player who's still young, still in his prime.
Before Mitch answers, give me the package.
Which package? There's 2 packages.
The bigger package, okay?
I will also take the bigger package with Xavier Legette.
There we go. All right, DJ Moore, Kyron Williams. Typical 12-team start 10 PPR. Mitch?
Kyron. I mean, I'm all about Kyron still. Yep.
And my answer is, what do you need? You know, I like building around the receiver, but Kyron's, man, I'm with you. I'm still bullish on him, Mitch. I think he's up there in that Barkley type category. But if my roster needed receiver more than running back, which probably is rare because there's more position scarcity in the running back, I'll say I'll go with Kyron for this answer. But there are a scenario where I could see more.
All right. And then DJ Moore or Devin Singletary in a 25 first, 12-team start 10 PPR. Dan?
Starting only 10, give me DJ Moore. I like him more than the first, and I'll live without Singletary.
See, I was going to say, going back to the topic that we had with Christian McCaffrey, if you're trading away Christian McCaffrey for picks, you're probably making that pick better. I don't feel that way with these kind of wide receivers, to be honest. So I don't know if DJ Moore is really making this team a higher playoff caliber team, more so than whatever they could find, for a little bit less. So I will take the first in Singletary this league.
Okay. Now we get into the names that you gentlemen brought to the table. And I still think we're doing okay time-wise. So I posed the question to you guys. Actually, Mitch posed the question, but I reworked the wording here. So Dan, who are your favorite veteran buys at their current costs that you think have big payoff potential in 2024?
You want me to rapid fire these with just a little bit of commentary, JB, or how do you want me to give you these names?
Let me give you the name and where they're going, and then you give me the commentary. Is that okay?
That works.
All right. So I'm going to steal Dan's thunder a little bit. Tony Pollard, 27 years old. Fantasy Calc running back 25. KTC 32. I'm at 26. Dan's at 20, or Dan's at 17. And then he is underrated. Mike Clay's projecting 11.7 points per game. So Dan, what do you see in Tony Pollard where the community is wrong?
Yeah, like I feel like I'm going to either totally eat this one because I'm so far off of everything and everybody, but is there really 25 plus running backs that are better than Tony Pollard? I just don't see that.
I mean, is Tajay Spears better than Tony Pollard?
that one was like laid up. Perfect.
I don't think so. I still think he's just a second-year player that's got some value and is going to spell Pollard. I mean, the red zone piece is going to be the interesting piece, whether Spears gets those touchdowns or do they rotate depending on whoever's on the field, that kind of thing. That's what I'll be really interested in seeing. But like, again, watching Dallas and watching every snap of Tony Pollard's career, which I have, a year ago, I truly believe the O-line was the issue. There was just no run games. When you go to Tennessee there, the father of head coach Brian Callahan, Bill, is the offensive line coach, and he's one of the best O-line coaches in football, and he's gonna create run lanes. And I just think if Will Levis doesn't suck, and I think Mitch is on Levis, I think, if he doesn't suck, they got an offense there that I think Pollard's going to produce. So I just think he's in his prime. There's not a lot of carries on him. I think he's much higher than the expected values. You see everyone having him ranked 25, 32, 26. Could easily see him ranking 10 spots higher, which is going to be a value for you in your dynasty leagues. And I think you'll get a couple years out of him. I think his contract is friendly where you're going to get him in Tennessee for at least 2 seasons.
Mitch, I want to throw it over to you just for a rebuttal or agree.
I'm a lot closer to everyone else's value than Dan's value. Only like we kind of saw Pollard last year. Yeah, we could say, it's the offensive line having issues with the Cowboys. That offensive line with the Cowboys was still miles ahead of what he's going to see with the Titans this year. So, I mean, it's hard, but I get it. I mean, if anything happens to Tajay Spears, what happens to Tony Pollard's value at that point? Then all of a sudden he does get up to running back 17. But this is one I'm a little hesitant on.
But again, like, is there any difference making appeal? And based on Dan's assumption here, there is. I just think he's kind of clumped in with so many guys. I wouldn't actively be looking to go out and acquire him personally, Dan. Personally.
I think just a year ago, and everybody was screaming for Tony Pollard every year with the Zeke situation.
Things change.
The running back climate, Saquon Barkley even calling him one of the better running backs in the game. He goes to Tennessee where, you'll have J.C. Latham at left tackle. They draft Skoronski at left guard. They got an offensive coordinator who's got some creativity in mind. I just think there's enough pieces there for him to separate. And, I'm not going to be scared away from Spears. It's kind of like Najee and Jalen Warren. Like there's enough volume there for two backs. And I think you'll start seeing those explosive plays from Pollard where he rips off the 20, 30-yard run and is going to get more production than where he's anticipated to. Now, again, there's a scenario there where Will Levis is just terrible and can't throw the ball. And then they stack the box and maybe things don't go as well. That's what I would be worried about, more than worried about Tony Pollard or Tajee Spears.
So the theme of Dan's players here are either current Cowboys or former Cowboys, because up next we have Amari Cooper, 30 years old, fantasy calc wide receiver 39, KTC 42. I'm at 43. Dan, wide receiver 30. Mike Clay, 13.8 points per game. What do you see in Amari Cooper in this Cleveland Browns situation that you're more optimistic than maybe anybody else?
And now this disclaimer, there are some non-Cowboys in my list of 5 veterans that I gave in the show notes. There is some Cowboys homerism here. I'm a sucker for Amari Cooper all the time. But man, I still remember that 50-point game late last season. I know Joe Flacco unlocked that, but he had a lot of good games with Deshaun Watson. Health is always the key for Amari Cooper. And I'm thinking he can still stay healthy. I'm thinking he's still clearly their number 1 receiver by far. If Watson just does anything to be decent, just slightly better than a year ago in that offense, I think Cooper's just a lot better than a bunch of those guys from 30 to 43, which is the lowest. JB, you and KTC there, 42, 43. I think Cooper holds more value than that. I think he could help you win a league for a guy that might be attainable.
Dan,
I was going to say, I completely agree. I think Amari Cooper is way undervalued in Dynasty right now, and he should be higher. I think, talked about Watson last week, but I think that offense is going to be a little bit more pass-centric because who knows what's going to happen when Nick Chubb comes back. So, in my opinion, I think Amari's a smash.
Dan, Amari or Ridley?
Amari
or Rashee Rice?
Amari.
Christian Watson.
I'm stopping Rice. Oh, now it gets hard. If I'm winning now, I'm going to just roll with Amari and eat it. If I'm not, I would go with the future career of Watson.
Christian Kirk.
Give me Amari.
Terry McLaurin.
Amari.
Deontay Johnson.
Amari.
Hollywood Brown.
Amari.
Stephon Diggs.
Oh. I'm gonna lean Diggs.
Justin Jefferson now. All right.
Just so everyone knows, I'm taking Amari in every one of those. Every single.
Really?
Yeah.
JB, I did have them in a close tier. They're not they're far off, but I'm just gonna go with Amari. He's ahead of him.
And I full disclosure, I have him tiered with most of all of those guys that I just mentioned, but I have him below if I get to choose. I'm wondering, and I have a really high Amari exposure. I'm wondering if it's time, even though we talked about veteran hunting, maybe I see if there's a market where I can move Amari Cooper and get a veteran back that maybe the community is a little bit lower on, plus a piece to get some of that insulated value.
11 catches,
guy.
265 yards late in the season, man, versus Houston. Oh, he's still good.
He is a very talented receiver. I'm not saying he's not. All right. Terry McLaurin, almost 29 years old, fantasy calc wide receiver 38, KTC 38. I'm at 38. Dan's at 39. Mike Clay has him clumped in there, 12.7 points per game in 2024. What do you got for Terry McLaurin here, Dan?
So McLaurin, man, I don't think he's a bust out player on my list by any means. I think he's the same Terry McLaurin you're getting every year. but I just think he's their clear number one, and I'm just putting in for the Jaden Daniels factor. I just think there's an opportunity there to maybe tap 4 or 5 more touchdowns potentially in that new offense. You might just get a little bit more out of McLaurin. He's just such a good dude, such a hard worker. He's so steady, 1,000-yard season every single year. He just kind of flies under the radar. And again, I'm not like we've heard in past few years of Dynasty talk predicting like this Terry McLaurin breakout by any means. I just think Jaden Daniels could get just a little bit more out of him, JB, that he might be able to exceed those rankings and be a solid player for you this year. A little above solid, you know.
See, I think you're right the first time. He's a solid player. I think he is accurately valued. If I can find somebody that is lower than him than market, I'm more than okay acquiring. If I have a buyer, if I'm looking to transition into more of a rebuild, if I'm stacked at wide receiver, if I can pivot off of Terry McLaurin for just slightly above market, I'm going to be interested in that. So we certainly are playing the margins there, and those margins can be razor thin. But I think he's accurately valued and not a player necessarily I'm going out looking to acquire unless I can get that discount.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, JB. It's just we says, hey, veterans that could provide us a big payoff. I'm just looking at that improved quarterback situation. And again, I'm not going to overpay for him by any means, and I'm more than happy to trade McLaurin. But I think he could get a little bit more production.
All right, so against that point per game projection of 12.7, do you think he could reasonably, do you think he could hit 15?
I think he creeps into that 14, 15 range on like one last career season. It's not out of the range of scenarios with Jaden Daniels.
So I mean, if he finishes with 14 points per game, like I'm not super excited about that.
Samuels is out of town. Tight end situation still a little murky.
Hopefully Dotson does more. He needed Curtis Samuel to leave town in order, to get up to that 15 mark.
Curtis Samuel's my underrated dog. We're getting there.
I love Curtis Samuel. I don't know who JB has lined up for this McLaurin discussion, but I'm not taking McLaurin in any of them. I can tell you that right
now. I mean, it's in that same range. It's in that Amari Cooper, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice, Watson, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Godwin, Hollywood.
I'll take all of those guys. Well, not Hollywood, but most of them over Terry.
I would too. I'm just saying, here's a veteran that I think could exceed, give us some more production. That's all.
That's what happens when you come up with like 15 players. You have to back them all up. That's the problem.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead. More conviction with the other guys.
Brandin Cooks, almost 31 years old. Dallas really doesn't do too much during this offseason. Fantasy calc all the way down there at wide receiver 85, KTC 83. I'm at 82. Dan's at 71. Mike Clay projecting for just over 10 points per game in PPR. Dan, do you think Brandin Cooks can just pop off and give us like one last top 24 season?
That's kind of the hope or window I'm looking at. I'm playing that what if game. Dude's in great shape. He's got another year under this system, another year with Dak. And I'm just saying, what if he's the number 2 instead of Ferguson? Or Dak even supports 3 guys. I just think their offense is still explosive. They've done nothing else. They're hoping Jalen Tolbert provides a little more production, with Gallup out of town. Most of the rankings, 82, 83, 85 here, and that you've listed, JB, I got him at 71. That's like almost 10 spots higher. So if I could get a little bit of depth for just a late round draft pick, 3rd round pick, I'd roll the dice just to have some receiver depth for bye weeks, injuries, that kind of thing.
I actually wouldn't mind going the other way with it, where we're talking about throwing a late to mid 25 3rd, let's say. But if you can get him thrown into larger deals, but also like you could probably get a 25 2nd added to Brandin Cooks for Amari Cooper. If you're moving Amari Cooper, if you're moving Terry McLaurin, like really, but
yeah,
what are we
on the other side there? I'm not that.
What are we losing? Yeah. What are we losing though? 2 points per game,
top 30 upside.
Yeah, Cooper might be the number 1 for a couple years there. Like Dallas could go off him next year for all we know.
Yeah, I mean, you have with those other wide receivers you're bringing up, you have 30-point upside weekly. I mean, the only way Brandin Cooks getting 30 points weekly is if he joins like the Arena Football League or something.
Yeah. I mean, Mitch, I'm playing DFS every week, and you get that one week where the team's got like a number one lockdown corner, and then not that Lamb's going to be locked down, but they're going to open up some more opportunities for a Cooks, and he's the clear number 2 wide receiver. You can make an argument whether Ferguson's going to be that really number 2 guy overall, but I think there's going to be some weeks where he could pop off, and I wouldn't mind it on my roster for something cheap.
The Cowboys are going to have to pass a lot this season. They just are. I mean, we're not going to see Ezekiel Elliott get 250 touches or 200 touches, and Rico Dowdle get another 150. They're going to pass a lot. I love Brandin Cooks at his cost right now. Like, I've been doing a lot of underdog drafts. He's on almost every single one of my teams because there is the hope to where he could give you just positional upside to where when other people are out weekly, you know what I mean? But to me, he's not someone that I'm looking to tear down to, right? That's the one difference for me.
But again, we're not tearing down from any type of high-end
Amari
player.
Cooper is high-end.
So, okay, what do you need added?
Amari Cooper.
What 2025 pick would you move Amari Cooper for? 12-team Superflex star 10.
I need it first.
You need a Cooper. And you're not moving Amari Cooper.
100%.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not moving him for
I know
a second.
that, though.
There's no way I'm moving Amari Cooper for a second.
That's the thing, JB. Like, why do you want a second for Cooper? I don't want to just get rid of a guy just for the sake of getting rid of him and trading him because he's older. I want to win.
I'm not saying move him just for a second, but I'm talking about I think the 25 second in a Brandin Cooks type player is a lot closer to market than anybody moving in 25 first.
Just remember, John says he has a lot of Amari Cooper, so I know what I'm doing immediately after the show.
Right? I'm going after your Cooper shit.
I have a Brandin Cooks somewhere. I'll even do like a second and a third.
Yes, and I said, and I said if I'm moving Amari Cooper, I need 2 firsts and Brandin Cooks.
Oh, there's JB's agent coming out. Oh boy.
I just got a message here in my headphones. We're not selling that low. No, but I mean, a pair of seconds in Brandin Cooks.
No, I'm not giving rid of a number 1 wide receiver. Again, JB, just because I put someone on a veterans like list at value doesn't mean I want to
actually value
get the world for him. I just saying he could help your team win. That's all.
So are you spending a 2025 first for Amari Cooper?
Probably not, unless it's really late and I have to have it to win. I mean, I'm not giving up my first easy unless I'm going to have something that I know is going to give me a lot of years, And like Cooper's going to hit that wall soon.
I'm going to pull a Mitch. If you need Amari Cooper to contend, are you contending?
Right. Probably. So it depends. To the point, I'm not getting rid of that first, most likely. When in Dynasty do we get rid of a first for a 30-year-old wide receiver? We don't.
Hey, here's the situation, Dan. You'll be on this one. Do you have Deshaun Watson already? And then will Amari Cooper just be a flex play? So you get the stack. Then he's not even a starting wide receiver. He's just a flex wide receiver for you. And you get the stack.
I mean, if you stack, you're saying go all in, right, Mitch? You're gonna go.
Exactly.
We're gonna be in. We go all in. There's the best scenario.
John hates stacks more than I hate warp, which is really impressive, to be honest.
How do you hate stacks? If you got the quarterback and he's going to score 400 points for you, I want his wide receivers.
All right, Dan. Curtis Samuel's the last guy on your list here. He's an old 27, almost 28 years old. Fantasy calc wide receiver 70, KTC 72. I'm at 62. You're at 58. Mike Clay, 11 points per game from a projection standpoint. Would you do Amari Cooper for Curtis Samuel in a second?
No, I still want my number 1 wide receiver. That's better than Brandin Cooks. At least I'm hearing you. But I'm still not pulling the trigger.
All right, but you're excited about the prospect of Curtis Samuel here. Similar type to Brandin Cooks, like obviously a few years younger, but dirt cheap from a 1-for-1 swap perspective. Get him thrown into larger deals. Package up some shit if you want to get Curtis Samuel, but you're more than willing to do that as opposed to tearing down, right? Is that?
Yeah, fair? I mean, if I could get Samuel on my rosters on the cheap, hey, take my thirds, take my fourths. If it's gonna be a late second, I probably need a little something. I don't know. Maybe I would give a late second. Depends on my roster. But I probably would give a late second. It's Josh Allen. Potentially, this could be Josh Allen's like number one wide receiver. I know we're in rookie fever and excited about Keon Coleman. I know there's Dalton Kincaid in there.
Chase Claypool's the number one receiver.
I'm not falling for that trap. Not even going near it. I don't even want to Chase Claypool on my waiver wire. But Curtis Samuel, he could run. He gets a little gadget running plays. He could do everything, and he looked good last year. So they've invested in him. Again, looking at rankings, seeing him 72nd, JB, I think it's kind of cool that you're seeing that little vision there, putting him at 62. I've got him at 58. I just think there's value to be had with Curtis Samuel with a lot of potential with Josh Allen.
Dan, I think out of the 5 players that you mentioned at their price point, I think Curtis Samuel is going to be the hardest one to get, because I think a lot of people that have him have this exact same hope we all have with him, right? And then anyone who doesn't, they know the hype this offseason. So I think he's going to be the hardest one to try to go and get, even though he's half the price of the rest of these guys.
Anyway, Dan, you lose all ability to talk and the right to talk when you mute yourself again. Mitch, you brought 2 names to the table.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Cooper Kupp, 31 years old, fantasy calc wide receiver 33, KTC 37. I'm at 34. Dan's at 31. Mike Clay has him coming in at 14.6 points per game here in 2024. But you believe he has big payoff potential in 2024.
So this is why I brought up at the very first of the show, there's players, if you're right on, you are going to be a better playoff contender than if you just let someone else have these guys on the roster, right? This is Mike Evans from last year, Keenan Allen from last year, those kind of guys. Cooper Kupp just could not be good anymore, right? Could easily be the case. But even towards the last end of last year, week 14 against Baltimore, week 15 against Washington, he combined for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 regular season games. So it's not like he was absolutely terrible. He just wasn't the Cooper Kupp that we saw last year. But the one big thing, like what we brought up with a player earlier when we were talking about Rashee Rice, the Chiefs went and added a whole bunch of players to that wide receiver room to help. The Rams literally added like a 7th round pick, and that's it. They added nobody else. So in my view, they would have the best idea if Cooper Kupp is completely done or not, because they'd have to bring in help. They have Puka and nobody else. And so in my opinion, I think Cooper Kupp is just, you have to be willing to take a 0. You have to be willing to be like, hey, this guy injury-wise cannot do it anymore. But if he can, he's giving you top 15 upside every single week. And I mean, there's just none of the other guys we've even talked about can do that. He is a guy that still can, in my opinion. So I'm willing to go out and get him.
Cooper Kupp is an interesting one because from a market perspective, I'm fairly close.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen him on a lot of trade baits when I'm going through. So he is somebody that if my team situation calls for it, I have been looking to package up, and going back to the episode of the Pivot Point earlier this morning, packaging up some depth for a player that on a weekly basis could give you that stud wide receiver, right? You know, I do think Amari Cooper could give you that. But I think Cooper Kupp, like that ceiling is just so tremendously high, even with Puka Nacua. I think you make a great point. They really didn't look to bring anybody else in. So if there was any concern, why didn't they do anything? Right.
Right.
And I see the comment from B Ford, Jordan Whittington slander, the late round rookie there. But with Cooper Kupp, like, can I like, these are still guys that I'm not really looking to move a first for, but I'll move.
I get it. Yeah.
I'll move equivalent value, or I'll even move more value in order to keep my first.
Yeah. Get him in a package. Don't just trade a 1-for-1 deal for him. Do a package deal, get a couple players and then move a couple picks.
Like I would be more willing to do like let's say Romeo Dobbs, a 25-second and a 26-second, which from a value perspective, just a value number is going to be higher than like a late 25 first.
Like, Dan, you might hate this one, but you can correct me. Let's say like I'm moving Lad McConkey, but then I get a Cooper Kupp and an additional piece. If I'm a contending team, I'm willing to do that. I understand Lad McConkey's what his value can be, but it's kind of like I'm not really giving up a first, but I'm giving up a player who's valued as a first sort of move.
Yeah, I do like that because I think Lad McConkey, there's a lot of hype around him and a lot of potential in the situation, but he's not like you're giving that receiver that's a Neighbors or Dunze that like is like guaranteed like ceiling here. They're different tiers. So to get that upside and ceiling of Cooper Kupp, it does really feel ugly having him in our rankings in the 30s. Like he doesn't feel like he belongs there. There is concerns of wear and tear, but as JB said, they didn't do anything to say we're replacing him now. They're still all in on him for this year. And we know Matthew Stafford could support 2 number 1 receivers without a doubt. No doubt in my mind there. So it's just really a matter of health.
Mitch, you brought to the table one of my favorite receivers, Chris Godwin, 28 years old, fantasy calc 43, KTC 47. I'm at 36. Dan's at 40. Mike Clay's projecting 14.3 points per game. So like a player that is valued in the 40s, like realistically, he's never going to gain that much value because of his age. But you see something in Chris Godwin here moving forward.
Yeah, so like just look at his last 3 years. They're almost identical. He had 1,100 yards in 21, 1,000 yards in 22, almost the exact same yardage in 24. He almost had the exact same first downs receiving over those last 3 years, right? But the big thing is they've already said he's moving back to the slot, which is great, right? And he didn't have a great year last year because he didn't score the touchdowns. I think he had 2 or 3, but he averages like 3 or 4. So it's not even that much higher. But you brought up he is valued at wide receiver 43, 47, 36, 40. He's a top 30 wide receiver every single week in this league. Like he's a top 30 guy. He's going to be there for the next 2 to 3 years. I'm all about getting a player like that, putting him in my wide receiver 3, and I don't need to worry about that position moving forward. And it's not going to cost you a first for it anymore because he had that down year last year, but really he was just off 20 points from his previous season. So, I mean, I'm still all about getting him.
I think the price point is beyond reasonable. Yeah. We're talking about like, let's just compare him to a Terry McLaurin. He's ranked below McLaurin on a lot of KTC fantasy calc, a few different resources, and I had to make sure I didn't have him below Terry McLaurin, and I don't. But you're buying almost a year back. You're assuming you're getting a little bit more in a point per game production standpoint, and he's a little bit less expensive. Like, yeah, sign me up. Same thing with Amari Cooper. Like, I think there was an opportunity to certainly pivot within that tier, and probably a player that's easier to package up to get. And you don't have to go out and pay an absurd value. It's just something you don't need to do.
Agreed. I'll leave this on one example where you could trade a first and maybe a second for old guys. All right. Before this year's rookie draft, Mitch, the league we used to be in 66 together, I traded 111 and 211. End of each round. There's some fluff in there that's irrelevant. And I got Derrick Henry and Stephon Diggs. Late first, early second, old vets, a lot of potential. I think that's the spirit of what I think we're trying to get.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few names that I was interested that you guys didn't mention, but Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, I thought that was interesting because Devontae Adams, he's somebody, if I see him on a trade bait, I'm sending an offer out. I think he's a little bit undervalued, even though the quarterback situation is not ideal. It wasn't ideal last year. And I just think, again, we talk about weekly upside and that potential stud status. Yes, he's older, but Devontae Adams fits that for me. Mitch, you and I talked about Deebo Samuel for how long last week? Yeah. And that's not changing. I find it interesting that neither of you mentioned a quarterback or a tight end.
So I wanted to bring up Mark Andrews. I really did. The one thing is, I think everyone wants to have Mark Andrews on their team. I don't think there's anyone that's like, no, I'm off him. So I really didn't want to bring him up for that reason. But quarterbacks, there's no really good old. Like, I'm not going to go out and get Derek Carr. Like, yay, there's just nothing there for me to be excited about.
Yeah, I agree with Mitch, man. I tried to force it, JB. We like to have some variety, but there was no one worthy.
Final thoughts.
All right. Episode 248 in the books, talking about some veteran gambles. Maybe some aren't really seen as gambles. Maybe some are, with big potential payoffs here. The payoff scale certainly was a sliding scale. Players like Brandin Cooks were brought to the table, which everybody hates them, even though you guys wanted to talk about it. Whatever. But anyway, Dan, final thoughts. What do you got for our listeners?
I'm just going to go on the record here. There's some controversy and a user review, and I often get questioned of what my favorite teams are.
I'm knocking stuff over laughing here. Really quick, I wish I had it up, but somebody gave a 3-star rating on the podcast, and the title is The Worst Fan Imaginable. Lakers, Cowboys, Phillies, Rangers, woof. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you for that generous 3-star rating because of Dan's freaking fandom. I knew this was going to come back to bite us. And he's on mute again.
I mean, talk about the worst fan.
See, I'm a mess because of that comment there. But the logos are on the back. I don't know if Dylan saw the logos on the back or he pieced our episodes together. How it impacted the review of the show, I don't know. But I just want to say, I hope my loyalty comes into consideration. I'm a loyal guy. I've liked these teams since I was like a teenager, and I've stuck with them. I liked them because of favorite players and uniforms and those kind of things. So I just want to go on the record. I'm loyal, and Dylan, maybe you'll reconsider that 3-star review. I don't know.
No, Dan, now it's probably going to be a 2 or 1 star. Wait until he finds out you like Georgia.
Georgia and Duke, it doesn't get any better. I know. But again, since I was a teenager, I'm loyal. It all comes down to loyalty,
I love it. We're going to have some fun with that in the chat. All right, Mitch, what do you got?
Leave us more reviews that are not 3-star. No, just kidding. I want to be like, update your trade bait this time of season. This is when a lot of people, they're sitting around at a barbecue. They're scrolling through their leagues. If you have your trade bait up, if it's my fantasy league, definitely post it in the group me chat, a screenshot of it, be like, hey, this is what's going on. In sleeper leagues, you don't need to do that because, it's posted up on the trade block, but definitely do that in all of your leagues because there's a little bit of an argument that happened because we updated a trade bait in one of our chats and received an offer, but they do help you receive offers. They might not be offers that you want to receive, but they will at least broach some activity going in the league.
A lot of controversy here involving the Dynasty Theory team over the last.
That's what we do.
We got yelled at in the league chat because Mitch put some players on the trade block. We co-manage. I rejected the offer very quickly, which you want people to respond to your offers. And then got yelled at because we didn't provide commentary, but that is neither here nor there. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this week's episode. We will be back same time next Sunday morning. For Mitch Sorensen, Dan Lamagna, I'm John Bauer. We'll catch everybody next week. Peace.